24 Interim Joint Committee on Education. I would ask all the members and guests, please silence your cell phones. Any members have any introductions or comments they want to make at this time? If not, Landon, please call the roll.
Senator Carroll. Here. Senator Funky Frommeyer. Present. Senator Givens. Senator Higdon. Senator Meredith. Senator Neal. Senator Stivers. Senator Thomas. Senator Tishner. Senator Williams. Here. Senator Wilson. Here. Senator Wise.
Here.
Representative Baker. Representative Bauman. Representative Bojanowski.
Here.
Representative Brown. Representative Callaway, Emily.
Present.
Representative Callaway, Josh.
Present.
Representative Decker. Representative Doan. Representative Jackson.
Present.
Representative Lewis.
Here.
Representative Massaroni. Representative McCool.
Here.
Representative Proctor. Representative Rayborn.
Here.
Representative Rawlings. Representative Raymond. Representative Riley. Representative Timoney.
Here.
Representative Truitt.
Here.
Representative Wilner.
Here.
Co-Chair West. Co-Chair Tipton.
Here. We do have a quorum. At this time, members, you should have a copy of the minutes from our November 8th meeting in your packets. Do I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion. Second.
A motion, is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Motion carries. At this time, we do have a rather full agenda. Members, you've got a lot of information in your packets. We've got a lot of ground to cover today. But I do want to take a brief moment. And I know we have some members who this will be their last meeting, their Interim Joint Committee on Education. Possibly. And I know Representative Rollins is moving over to the Senate. I don't know your committee assignments for next year, but just in case you're not back, you have any comments you want to make? Very briefly, Representative Rollins.
Oh, no, I will be a member of the Education Committee.
So we haven't got rid of you yet?
No.
Okay, very good. So we know you're coming back.
Thank you.
And I know, I don't believe Representative Raymond is here. I know she is leaving the General Assembly to go for the Metro Council, but appreciate her service on the committee. And Representative Timoney, would you have some comments? You have any comments you want to share? Thank you for your service on the committee.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, the committee. You know, obviously education is near and dear to my heart. I've had the awesome opportunity to work in several capacities in education. You know, with starting out, you know, my mom was a special education teacher and my dad was an Ivy League professor. So I got quite the spectrum growing up of educational capacities. But the one thing that was really important in our family was giving back and serving others. I had a lot of opportunities to pursue different careers, but I chose education because it was one that you can definitely give back on. And I think that where we are personally right now in Kentucky, even in the wake of, you know, the big amendment that everybody's talking about, there's still so much work to do. And the commitment from, you know, for what we're going to do for our early childhood through elementary, through middle to high and to higher ed, we've got to stay committed. If we are going to create an environment of prosperity for the Commonwealth, it's through education. It's through education. It's through education. It's through education. When we have an educated workforce, we're going to attract employers that pay more. And when people are paid more, they contribute more to the economics of the community and the Commonwealth. And I think that we need to continue attracting those companies, and we're going to do it by making sure our workforce is competent and skilled. And I feel good in the work that we've done up to this point, but there's still a lot of work to do. And I won't be here physically, but I will definitely be monitoring from wherever I am. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Tipton. Representative Timoney. Too many T's. Representative Timoney, would you join me in showing our appreciation? Thank you. The first item on our agenda today is a report on SJR 170, the feasibility of post-baccalaureate programs. Would the presenters that are here come to the table? And I believe we also may have some who are available via online. If I see Dr. Thompson's here, if him and the ones who are presenting online would identify yourself for the record, I will swear in the oath.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Aaron Thompson, the president of the Kentucky Council on Post-Secondary Education.
Thank you. Scott Friedman, Principal, Deloitte Consulting.
Thank you. Amy Whitmire, Specialist Leader with Deloitte Consulting.
Okay, I also know that we have some other folks online from our universities that they will not be part of the presentation, but they will be available for questions as well as those in person. Would you presenters raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, please proceed, President Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee. First of all, I just want to take the opportunity to thank those that are moving on to other places. Representative Timoney, what a joy it's been to work with you. I love your brain. I love the way you think. Thank you for your service. I also want to thank the presidents and other university and KCTCS officials who are with us today. If you have any questions, we have them represented, so you can clearly ask. I want to thank those that have been a part of this, and I want to thank the legislature for giving us SJR 170. Several things that I'll have to say before we get started, and I'll make it fast, is that we still know that the most direct route to an educated workforce and a good economy is through higher ed. Doesn't have to be a 4-year degree, but through higher ed. We've seen this over and over again. Research shows it. And what we need to do in Kentucky is even to get better. We know that, but I want to brag a little bit. Kentucky was one of the first states, if not the first state, to bounce back in enrollment after COVID. Last year, we set some enrollment gain records, and this year we are doing the same. Our graduation rates are up, our attainment rates up, and our retention rates are up. We're getting people through. We got a 4-year degree again for those that are worried. Our student loans are significantly down. People graduating with less debt than ever. We're taking more of the money that the campuses have gained through other sources and putting it towards student success, and I'm proud of that. So I would be remiss as the head of higher education that I didn't take the time to thank all of you who are taking part in looking at exactly where we need to go in the future in higher ed. And my ask is that you be proactive partners with us to make sure that we get there and do it in a manner that keeps Kentucky moving forward. So thank you for your work, and thank you for giving us this to take a look at. I won't spend a lot of time talking. I'll let Deloitte jump in because we got a lot to cover. But SJR, I really want to thank Deloitte. I think they did exactly the job we asked them to do. A fairly detailed set of reports here that they boiled it down into a very easy way of thinking about it as you make your decisions about where you want to go next year. The other item I will talk a little bit about later on is the need for us to truly have a program approval, program review process that may not call for an SJR down the road again in this area, because I think it is important that we do the things that are good in Kentucky to align mission with the building of our regions as well as the state as a whole. With that in mind, Mr. Chair, I'll ask Deloitte to start their presentation.
Thank you, committee, and thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. Thank you for your time today. My name is Scott Friedman, and I'm a principal with Deloitte Consulting with a focus on higher education. I lead the firm's higher education strategy capability. I've been with Deloitte for approximately 9 years, focused exclusively on management and strategy consulting for colleges, universities, and associated and affiliated entities. And I have been doing that exact work for 19 years in total. With me today is my colleague, Amy Whitmire, whom I will now have introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amy Whitmire, and I am a specialist leader with Deloitte Consulting as well, also with a focus on higher education and higher education strategy. I have worked with Deloitte for over 4 years, but prior to my time at Deloitte, I spent 14 years in higher education administration directly, including roles in career services and academic program administration. Thank you.
If we could pull up the slides.
The slides are pulled up.
Oh, they are? Apologies, I do not see them on my screen. Okay, well, I will just articulate and suggest when the slide. So if we could move to slide 2, that says full report table of contents at the top. Our work was conducted. Oh, excellent. Yes, if you could jump to the next slide, that would be fantastic. Perfect. Thank you. Our work was conducted pursuant to the requirements of SJR 170, which occasioned 5 analyses, specifically feasibility reviews of proposed doctoral programs at Eastern Kentucky University, Murray State University, Western Kentucky University, and Kentucky State University, as well as a review of the CPE coordinated program approval process. Amy's going to talk through the details of our scope in a minute. You have previously been provided our full report. Today, we will focus on the executive summary, specifically a review of the scope of our study, the approach and methodology that we undertook, and the summary of our findings, the elements that are encircled on the left. I will now turn it over to Amy to start to walk through the executive summary.
Thank you, Scott. If we could head to slide 4, please. Our first section of the executive summary discusses the scope of the study, and I will share that with you all now. We'll head to the next slide, slide 5, please. This is an overview of the SJR 170 study. CPE engaged Deloitte Consulting between August and November of this year, 2024, in a 14-week project to conduct 4 feasibility studies and offer recommendations regarding the overall new program approval process going forward. The study related to the feasibility of 4 different universities pursuing 4 different post-baccalaureate programs. Here listed on the slide is the list of those universities and programs. So first, the Eastern Kentucky University, EKU's proposal for a doctoral program for osteopathic medicine, or a DO program. Next, Murray State University's proposal for a doctoral program of practice and licensure in veterinary medicine, or a DVM. Third, Western Kentucky University's proposal to launch 1 or more PhD programs leading to the R2, or high research designation, from the Carnegie classification, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And finally, Kentucky State University's proposal for a PhD program in integrated agroecology and sustainable agriculture. Importantly, the charge of this report was a feasibility assessment, specifically the intersection of a proposed program at a particular university. So the assessment was confined to this narrow scope: feasibility of program X at University Y. Finally, the study offers recommendations to CPE and policymakers regarding the evaluation and approval of future new program proposals. If we could head to the next slide, please. For each of the 4 feasibility studies, we include here a 1-page proposal overview, which is meant to give the reader a snapshot of the university, their motivating factors in pursuing the program, helpful definitions for those not as close to the discipline or not as close to higher education, and fast facts on the right to share the scope of the proposed program or endeavor. We have listed these proposal overviews from the largest and most material to the smallest. EKU's proposal representing the largest target enrollment and largest required new hiring of faculty and staff. Here with EKU, the proposed program is a College of Osteopathic Medicine, which would produce DOs. And within the report, we will also use the language of DO School or College of Osteopathic Medicine, COM. This contrasts, and this DO program contrasts with allopathic medical schools, which produce MDs, though most DO graduates tend to practice in primary care settings. Noteworthy to this endeavor would be the fact that most colleges of osteopathic medicine, or COMs, and this is the case in EKU's proposal, employ a distributive model of clinical education that sends students into external facilities for their third and fourth year rotations. On the right here on this slide, you can see the proposed program launch date of fall of 2028, the target cohort size for each class of 150 students with a full enrollment of 600 students, and a significant number of new faculty and staff required. Ultimately, EKU's stated motivations are to help alleviate the shortage of physicians in Kentucky and in rural communities, and to enhance the university's brand and to increase the financial position of the university. Now we'll turn to the next slide of Murray State. As we turn to Murray State University, the proposal relates to a doctoral program in veterinary medicine, or DVM. Importantly, the Vet Med program would employ a distributive model for clinical education, similar to the DO program at EKU we just reviewed, where students would complete their education via a network of clinical partners. On the right, you can see a proposed program launch date of fall 2027, a target cohort size of 70 students with a total enrollment of 280 by year 5, and our estimates of 15 incremental faculty and 42 staff and administrators to operate the school. Here, as shared by Murray State, their motivating factors in pursuing this DVM program are to help address the shortage of rural veterinarians, to offer the first veterinary medicine program in Kentucky, allowing for Kentuckians to stay close to home for their studies, and finally, to build on their existing agricultural facilities and expertise. Next slide, please. Now with WKU, their proposal is for baccalaureate expansion is a bit different because it relates to their Carnegie classification status. Carnegie classification in the United States is a way to categorize U.S. higher education institutions. WKU would like to achieve the R2 research designation, classified as high research activity. To achieve this status, which is released and named every 3 years, a university must confer, and that is important, not enroll, but confer, a minimum of 20 doctoral research degrees and conduct a minimum of $5 million in total research expenditures annually. There are currently no R2 universities in Kentucky. This proposal would be a longer-term aspiration, beginning with WKU's intention of launching a PhD in data sciences first, then likely adding other PhD programs to achieve the R2 status. For the data sciences program, which the project team analyzed in depth, the scope of the PhD program would be ultimately for 29 new PhD students enrolled, with 2 faculty required. WKU is pursuing this designation to elevate the university's profile, helping it to attract high-quality faculty, students, and external funding. Additionally, they hope to capitalize on economic growth in the region, particularly as it relates to the first proposed PhD program of data sciences. And finally, if we can move to the next slide for Kentucky State University. The proposed program is a PhD in integrated agroecology, the integrative study of the nexus of plants, animals, soil, environment, and humans, with the goal of long-run enhancements to agricultural production, environmental quality, and non-renewable resource management. This would be the first doctoral program of its kind in Kentucky. This proposed PhD program for KSU has the target launch date of fall 2025, with 20 total targeted enrolled PhD students and 4 new faculty required. KSU is motivated to pursue this PhD program to maximize their already high levels of research and funding, elevating awareness of KSU's research profile, while also capitalizing on their strengths in environmental studies, aquaculture, and other agriculture programs. Now I'll pass to Scott to discuss the approach and methodology of our report.
Thank you so much, Amy. If we could jump to the next slide. I will now spend some time walking you through our approach and methodology. Please note that this section applies to all 4 of the doctoral program feasibility studies. If we can jump to slide 11. Excuse me. To promote analytical rigor, objectivity, and consistency across the 4 feasibility studies, we established a set of principles to guide our analysis. I will not walk through all of these guiding principles, but there are a few that I think are worth highlighting specifically. First of all, we felt that it was important to engage extensively with the leadership at the 4 institutions to understand their goals, visions, and plans for the proposed programs. But we needed to balance that with ensuring that our findings were exclusively evidence-based. In the report, you will see that our findings are mapped to validated and reputable data sources, including the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Dataset, otherwise known as IPEDS, SHIO, and industry organizations such as the American Veterinary Medicine Association and the American Association of Colleges of Osteopathic Medicine. We engaged with a diverse set of stakeholders, both within and outside the proposing universities, to develop a holistic perspective on the programs and the likely benefits and risks inherent in each. We took a forward-looking perspective, meaning that we reviewed the programs, processes, and relevant statutes from both a current state and future state perspective, incorporating anticipated changes to the broader higher education ecosystem and landscape. We prioritized attention on analysis that would materially impact the feasibility assessments. And finally, we attempted to arrive at a balance between the goals of the individual institutions and how each proposed program would potentially address the broader needs of the Commonwealth and its citizenry. If you'll jump to the next slide, please. Thank you. Over the course of the last 3+ months, our team is engaged with a diverse group of stakeholders across the various scopes of analysis. We spoke with more than 75 university administrators, staff, and faculty at the proposing institutions, and spent time on each of the campuses engaging in person with their leadership teams. We interviewed CPE leadership and met with them regularly to promote alignment and transparency. We met with a dozen government and community officials, including state senators, representatives, and representatives in the governor's office. We engaged with leadership from 7 other institutions, including the University of Kentucky, KCTCS, and Moorhead in the Commonwealth, as well as Auburn, Loyola Marymount, UMES, and Texas Tech outside of Kentucky. These interviews supplemented benchmarking conducted with more than 100 peer institutions of the proposing universities, leveraging publicly available data. And we met with leaders from industry associations, received and reviewed position letters from industry organizations and practitioners, and spoke with potential employers and clinical partners relevant to a few of the proposals. If you could jump to the next slide, please. Thank you. In addition to those qualitative inputs, we reviewed hundreds of documents provided by CPE and the 4 proposing institutions. These data were focused on enrollment, student success, institutional and programmatic finances, facilities, and intended staffing for the various programs. We also validated institutional assumptions by leveraging a number of external data sources, including credit agency findings, accreditation reports and standards, demographic and labor market trends, and information from the Kentucky Performance Funding Model. If you could jump to the next slide, please. Therefore, to develop a digestible picture of our feasibility assessment, which Dr. Thompson referred to earlier, to develop a digestible picture of our feasibility assessments to align with SJR 170, we developed a set of criteria on which to evaluate each of the proposed programs. Given the requirements of SJR 170 that each institution's recent financial performance, sufficiency of research facilities where appropriate, and performance on student success outcomes be considered in the analysis, we evaluated each proposing institution across those 3 dimensions. We then evaluated the feasibility of each proposed program across 6 different future-looking dimensions, a few of which were not relevant for all of the programs, as you'll see in a second. The first was faculty recruitment. Specifically, can the program recruit and retain sufficient qualified faculty to deliver the program? The second was student demand. Is there sufficient student interest for the specific program and/or field of study? Number 3 was workforce alignment. How aligned is the program with meeting existing or future anticipated workforce needs in the Commonwealth? And will graduates find meaningful placements in their chosen fields? Number 4 was accreditation standards. Will the institution be able to obtain and maintain necessary accreditation for the program? Number 5, which Amy's referenced a few times previously, had to do with clinical placements. Where hands-on practical experience is required for the degree, will the program be able to secure these placements? And number 6 was a cost-benefit analysis. How do the costs associated with launching and operating the program compare to the expected revenues and other returns that would be generated by the program? And so with this rubric in mind, I will turn it over to Amy to walk through our findings relative to each of the proposed programs.
Thank you. And before we dive into the summary of findings, I would like to ground you all in the meaning of the 1-page feasibility assessments you are about to view. For each of the dimensions that Scott just outlined, we performed a detailed analysis, which is contained in the full report, and summarized each dimension with an accompanying color of red, yellow, or green. What we are communicating in these summaries is that for each of the dimensions, such as workforce alignment or student demand, we may have no or few feasibility concerns, indicated by green, some feasibility concerns, indicated by yellow, significant feasibility concerns, indicated by red. Finally, I wanted to share that the red, yellow, green marker does not represent a go or no-go judgment. This is for policymakers and decision makers to ultimately decide. Our analysis is meant to highlight with data and evidence where there may be feasibility concerns so that, again, decision makers may make informed decisions and/or discuss these risks before launching these new programs. So with that in mind, let's review the first feasibility assessment for EKU. As mentioned, for each of the 4 program proposals, we have developed a summarized feasibility assessment meant to summarize the detailed report, provide a snapshot of the red, yellow, green, which I just mentioned, and report out an overall feasibility assessment. All of this, again, summarizes a very detailed report. First, we'll review EKU and the proposed College of Osteopathic Medicine, or COM. As we dive into the assessment, it's important to note that many of the feasibility concerns here that we've noted would be present at any higher ed institution looking to start a DO program, not necessarily specific to EKU, given the cost and the scale of this endeavor. High costs and high accreditation standards elevate the risk profile. Now let's head to each dimension. First, with regards to financial health, we noted some feasibility concerns here driven by EKU's declining enrollments, contributing to declining operating revenues, and increasing debt levels that have outpaced the growth in cash and investments. For student success, we have no or few concerns noted here. EKU outperforms its peer group average in first-year retention, and its 6-year graduation rate is on par with the national average for 4-year universities. EKU also performed better than other Kentucky public comprehensive universities on 5 out of 9 metrics monitored in the comprehensive funding model. With regards to research, EKU, like the other comprehensives in this study, is not a research institution, so it is understandable that their current research expenditures are low. We have indicated some feasibility risks for them because their current research expenditures are lower than even the median for the regional comprehensives. This is relevant because the accreditation body for DO schools requires DO schools to invest in significant research and scholarly output. So this is a place that EKU will need to invest in to meet those accreditation standards. Now, here's where we transition from the first 3 dimensions into the assessment criteria related to the proposal itself. First, now, with the cost-benefit analysis. A DO school is a resource-intensive endeavor. By our projections, operating expenses for the new DO school may exceed $16 million under moderate planning assumptions and $21 million under conservative assumptions, not to mention $70 to $75 million in capital investments needed to construct new facilities associated with the DO school. That said, even with high operating expenses and without ongoing state support for operations, our projections show that the COM generates a comfortable surplus under both conservative and moderate scenarios, which may be reinvested into the DO school or EKU more broadly. This is consistent with what we've seen at other DO schools in the United States. The EKU COM is also projected to generate significant economic impact in Madison County and Kentucky more broadly. With regards to student demand, demand for seats in DO programs is high today and projected to remain high in the future, even after accounting for a possible 26% growth in DO programs in the United States as other institutions also look to enter this market. With regards to workforce alignment, data and analysis validates EKU's claims that there is a shortage of primary care physicians in Kentucky. Graduates of DO programs pursue careers in primary care at higher rates than graduates of MD programs, who tend to go into specialties at higher rates, which positions a DO program to address this primary care shortage. In faculty recruitment, and we note that the last 3 criteria of faculty recruitment, accreditation requirements, and clinical placements would likely apply to any institution looking to launch a DO school, again, considering the materiality and risk. For faculty recruitment, we have noted elevated feasibility concerns based on the magnitude of investment here. We estimate that EKU will need to hire at least 19 faculty FTEs and they will command salaries that far exceed EKU's current average faculty salaries. The dean of the EKU school will likely need to be the highest compensated employee at EKU. For accreditation standards, the Commission on Osteopathic College Accreditation, or COCA, sets a very high bar for institutions to clear to receive accreditation for DO schools. Of note, EKU will need to hold over $48 million in reserves until it graduates its first class. EKU expects to ask the legislature for this funding, which would revert back to the state once EKU graduates its first class. The reserves funding is meant to serve as a protection for students who enroll at EKU before the school is accredited, as it would be used to compensate those students should EKU not fulfill its duties and achieve full accreditation. Other accreditation standards that create elevated risk for EKU are research and scholarly activity. Since EKU does not do much research now, they will need to invest significantly to meet COCA's research requirements, as well as clinical placements, as EKU will need to ensure the quality of the education provided at distributed clinical sites, as well as the clinical facilities. And finally, with regards to clinical placements, DO schools do not have teaching hospitals. Instead, they send students into the community for their 3rd and 4th years to receive clinical training at hospitals, clinics, and other medical facilities. This creates feasibility concerns and risks for any potential DO school, as they need to secure a number of those clinical placements. At scale, EKU's COM will ultimately need to facilitate clinical education for approximately 300 students, fulfilling 4 rotations per year per student. At the time of our assessment, EKU could not enter into formal agreements with partners since they have not yet been given statutory approval to launch the school. They have secured letters of support from several community partners, including Baptist Health Richmond, ARH, and CHI St. Joseph, which we have noted in the report. However, the project team did not receive evidence of an anchor partner or sufficient clinical placement capacity to remove these feasibility concerns. Now let's move to Murray State University and the feasibility assessment there. And as a reminder, this is a proposed College of Veterinary Medicine. For financial health, we have noted no or few concerns here. Murray State has generally balanced growth in net position and a strong balance sheet. For student success, no or few concerns noted here either. Murray State's student success metrics have consistently outperformed the averages of their Kentucky comprehensive peers, and Murray has performed better than or equivalent to other Kentucky public comprehensive institutions on 8 of 9 metrics tracked in the Kentucky Performance Funding Model. For research, we've noted no or few concerns here. While Murray is not a research institution, their current research expenditures are on par with the median of other public comprehensives in Kentucky, and notably, they have existing facilities and equipment in veterinary sciences that can support growth in research in this area. Now turning to the proposed CVM, or College of Veterinary Medicine itself. For the cost-benefit analysis, a CVM is a resource-intensive endeavor. By our projections, operating expenses for the new CVM school may exceed $13 million per year. Notably, we used peer benchmarks to inform the assumptions behind faculty and staff hiring needs, the biggest expense driver in the model. Murray State asserts that they can operate a CVM with a much leaner staff than their peers, specifically with 8 FTEs, including 3 student workers, and this compares to 40 FTEs by our estimates. This is because they have existing animal care staff that they can scale across the vet school. That said, our projections accounted for the full staffing needs of the college, including admissions staff and clinical placements administration, and we could not validate that they have existing staff that could be scaled in these areas. In our model, the CVM would generate a modest surplus under moderate planning assumptions and a deficit under conservative assumptions. The vet school is also projected to generate significant economic impact in Callaway County and Kentucky more broadly. For student demand, demand for seats in DVM programs is high today and is projected to remain high in the future, even after accounting for a possible 45% growth in DVM programs in the US, as other institutions also look to enter this market and established schools plan to grow their existing class sizes. For workforce alignment, we indicated some feasibility risk here due to concerns that the proposed CVM is not the best solution to address the shortage of rural veterinarians in Kentucky. Importantly, while there is evidence of certainly a shortage of large farm animal veterinarians in rural counties in Kentucky, historical data and industry experts dispute claims that a new in-state veterinary school can meaningfully address this shortage. They point to challenges in the vet student pipeline. Most vet students aspire to care for companion animals, and most vet students, approximately 80%, come from urban and suburban areas and plan to return after graduations. DVM students on average also carry high debt levels and are attracted to companion care positions in urban and suburban settings because those jobs tend to pay more. Murray State disputes these limitations and believes that they are well positioned to address the rural vet shortage due to their historical success sending graduates of professional programs into rural communities. Regarding faculty recruitment, we note some feasibility concerns based on the magnitude of investment as well as a current documented shortage of veterinary medical faculty in the US. We estimate that Murray will need to hire approximately 15 new faculty FTEs, and they will command salaries that far exceed Murray's current average faculty salaries. Murray has accounted for these high salaries in their plans, and they have some vet faculty on staff currently who could teach in the new CVM, which mitigates some, but not all, of the risk here. Accreditation standards. The AVMA, which is the governing accreditation body, sets a high bar for institutions to clear to receive accreditation for CVMs. Murray State will need to produce substantial high-quality research, which requires significant investment, including a potential investment in startup packages to compete for faculty, which peers estimate at approximately $300,000 to $400,000 per research faculty member. They will also need to provide facilities sufficient to house animals for teaching and research. While they are currently planning the construction of a new veterinary sciences building that will serve the needs of future veterinary students, as well as students in their pre-vet and vet tech programs, which they've already secured funding for from the legislature, some peer program deans noted that the animal welfare requirements for animal sciences facilities differ from veterinary medical facilities, and the project team was unable to validate Murray has factored that into their current design and construction plans. Related to clinical placements, CVMs use the distributive models of veterinary medicine. They do not have teaching hospitals. Instead, they send students into the community for their third and fourth years to receive clinical training at hospitals, clinics, zoos, and other facilities. This creates feasibility concerns and risks for any potential CVM using the distributive model, as they need to secure a number of clinical placements. Compared to DO programs, which we just reviewed for EKU, CVMs using the distributive model cannot scale clinical placements to the same degree. They typically can only put 1 to 2 students at a clinical site at a time. leading us to estimate they will need over 200 clinical partners to fulfill curricular requirements. While many surveyed vets across the Commonwealth have expressed interest in providing clinical rotations to Murray students, Murray may need to look outside of the state to find all necessary clinical partners, particularly in animal medicine specialties where the potential clinical sites are more limited. Lincoln Memorial CVM across the border in Tennessee, as a gauge, sends students into 35 states for clinical rotations, though we note that LMU's student body is larger than Murray's proposed. Let's move on to Western Kentucky now. And again, this is the proposal to achieve R2 status, beginning with a PhD in data sciences. And this is important to note here that this is a small investment relative to the DO and vet schools we just reviewed. This is few faculty and no new facilities. Also note that for this feasibility assessment slide, we evaluated some criteria with the broader R2 pursuit in mind, and others on the basis of their first program proposal, again, a PhD in data sciences. For financial health, some concerns are noted here, largely stemming from several years of enrollment declines, coupled with rising expenses. While these financial pressures are common in public higher education right now, it does raise some concerns about the ability to fund new investments. For student success, no or few concerns are noted here. WKU outperforms peers on student success metrics. With regards to research, WKU's current research expenditures already exceed the research expenditures needed to achieve R2 status. They have also made some foundational policy changes to faculty workload and invested in central research infrastructure, which positions them for research growth. So we have noted no or few feasibility concerns here. For cost benefit, like most PhD programs, WKU's proposed PhD in data sciences is not projected to make money, though this is a modest investment with plans to hire just 2 new faculty. The biggest expense is student tuition waivers and stipends. While harder to measure, the program is projected to create qualitative benefits for WKU, including increasing attractiveness for faculty and students and opportunities to grow extramural funding. Now, with regards to student demand for data sciences programs across levels is high, and WKU only aspires to bring a few students into the program each year. Therefore, we have noted no or few concerns here. Workforce alignment. Data sciences degrees would directly prepare students to either create research in service of Kentucky industry or obtain roles in high demand fields in Kentucky and surrounding areas with growth projected. Our analysis did not reveal any concerns here. Faculty recruitment. WKU is only proposing hiring 2 new faculty, so this is a modest investment and initiative, and WKU's starting salaries are competitive. Accreditation standards. The proposed PhD programs would need to be accredited by the SAC COC under the substantive change process, but we see no barriers to earning this accreditation. And finally, the clinical placements dimension is not applicable to WKU and their R2 proposal. And finally, we will head to Kentucky State University's proposal for the integrated agroecology PhD. As with WKU, KSU's proposal is a small investment relative to the DO and vet schools, few faculty, and no new facilities required. The biggest benefit of this proposal is that it resides in KSU's land grant program, which opens up to federal funding sources. For financial health, our report noted significant feasibility concerns stemming from recent financial performance as well as financial management practices. While KSU is making progress on its management improvement plan, they still have work to do to improve the stabilization of the institution's finances, raising questions about their ability to launch a new initiative while maintaining focus on financial improvement. Note that our assessment for KSU was only completed through FY22, as that is the last audit available for KSU and thus the most recent financial data that we can validate. KSU notes some improvement in recent years, though we cannot validate this due to the lack of audited financial statements. For student success, we note significant feasibility concerns here, as KSU's student success metrics by national standards and compared to other comprehensive institutions and other public HBCUs across the United States lag significantly, raising questions about their ability to launch a new initiative focused on graduate students without risking further performance on student success goals. For research infrastructure, no concerns are noted here. KSU's current research expenditures far exceed other comprehensive institutions, thanks largely to their land grant program and the federal funding that it has received. They also have infrastructure related to this particular PhD program in place to serve as a foundation for the proposed program. For cost benefit, again, like most PhD programs, KSU's proposed PhD in integrated agroecology is not projected to make money, though it is a modest investment with plans to hire just 3 new faculty. The biggest expense is student tuition waivers and stipends. Of note, KSU has access to several federal funding streams, again, thanks to its land grant and HBCU status, which can fund many of the program's projected operating costs, minimizing the subsidization that this program would require from KSU. For student demand, integrated agroecology is a small but growing field, and the assessment projects healthy demand here. KSU's current master's programs could serve as a pipeline to help them achieve their enrollment goals, and they currently have MOUs in place with several international governments and institutions that also create potential student pipelines. For workforce alignment, this program would directly contribute to Kentucky's agriculture industry and may particularly benefit small and mid-sized farmers, not just through its potential graduate pipeline, but also its research potential. For faculty recruitment, again, low or no feasibility concerns here. KSU is only proposing hiring 3 new faculty. We see no concerns about the potential pipeline for these faculty. For accreditation standards, the proposed PhD programs would need to be accredited by the SAC-COC, again under the substantive change process, but we see no significant barriers to earning this accreditation. As with WKU, the clinical placements dimension is not applicable to the KSU PhD proposal. Now, having finalized those 4 feasibility assessments, I would like to pass it back to Scott to discuss the recommendations surrounding new program approval process in the future.
Thank you, Amy. Turning quickly to the final element of our analysis, we were asked to review the program approval process as it relates to CPE. Per KRS 164.020, CPE's statutory duties include, among other things, defining and approving the offering of all post-secondary degrees, certificates, and diploma programs, and reviewing, revising, and approving the missions of the state's universities. These 2 components of CPE's authority are highlighted on this slide, as they are the elements that are specifically relevant to SJR 170. If you could jump to the next slide, please. Thank you. In 1997, the Kentucky Post-Secondary Education Improvement Act included KRS 164.295, which, inter alia, outlined the programs that the 6 comprehensive universities could provide, including providing that graduate programs could be provided with CPE's approval.
Mr. Friedman, we
Yes.
are running a little short on time today. We've got that material. Could you go on to your legislative recommendations on this, please?
Sure, yes. So if you jump to the next slide, So we have some recommendations for legislative consideration, as well as some process recommendations that are included on the next slide. Legislatively, we believe that the missions of the public universities should be clarified in state statute, especially in light of the evolving landscape of higher education. Specifically, it would be helpful if, for each institution, statute clarified its place in the Commonwealth, particularly regarding research and doctoral programs, providing each institution with clarity, differentiation, and the opportunity to meaningfully innovate. Additionally, best practice across the country would suggest a clear separation of duties by and between the legislature and the coordinating entity. If the missions of the public institutions were clarified, the coordinating entity could more fully realize their statutory empowerment. And then finally, on the next slide, we also have, sorry, if you could jump to the next slide. Thank you. We also have 4 primary recommendations that we have provided to CPE for their consideration based on our review of practice and process and a review of practices and processes at peer coordinating boards and university systems. First, we suggest that there could be additional differentiation in terms of proposal requirements based on the types of new degrees being proposed. Currently, the CP process has a few different tracks, but several peers have greater differentiation in their processes. Second, we suggest an external review component be brought into the process, especially for those programs that either deviate from an institution's historical scope or that require significant financial investment. Third, we suggest increased transparency as it relates to the decision to approve or not approve a program, as well as publishing of the criteria that will be used to make program approval decisions. And finally, we suggest instilling an accountability mechanism to the process to enable a post-implementation review for approved programs to evaluate if those newly created programs are fulfilling their original goals and intent. We'll now turn it back to the committee for any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. We do have some individuals who'd signed up to speak. However, due to time, we're not going to be able to have time for that at this point. I will point out that on December 19th at 1 o'clock, the Interim Joint Committee on Agriculture is having a report from Deloitte specific to the Murray State proposal for the veterinary school distributive model. I believe that's probably what your comments were aligned to. We do have some members. I'm going to ask the members if we could hold off at this time because I'd like for us, this is an information gathering meeting. I'd like for us to have the opportunity to get through the SJR 179 report. If we have time, we'll go back to that at this time. So, President Thompson, if we could defer to the next item on our agenda, which Dr. Ryan Quarles, President of KCTCS, with a report on the SJR 179 report. President Quarles, if you and your team could identify yourself for the record, then I'll administer the oath and you can proceed.
Ryan Quarles, President of KCTCS.
James McCaslin, Acting Executive Director for the Project Management Office for KCTCS.
Phil Neal, Acting Executive Vice President and Provost for KCTCS.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God.
I do.
Okay, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for having us today. I once served on the Education Committee as a member of the State House Representative, so thank you for your service. Today I'm joined with Dr. Phil Neal, our Provost and Executive Vice President, as well as Dr. Jay McCaslin. We also have one of our regents in the audience today, our Student Regent Audra South. Thank you for joining us. Several of our presidents and cabinet members. Today we're going to go over our recommendations in response to Senate Joint Resolution 179, a recommendation set that our Board of Regents unanimously adopted just last Thursday as a package. And so it's a new day at KCTCS, and this joint resolution recommendations are just the beginning. But first, we have a lot to celebrate. Just very quickly, you all know we've been around for over 25 years. We educate 45% of all undergraduates in Kentucky. Our enrollment is up 7% from this time last year, and we project our enrollment could be as high as 16% higher from this time last year for the spring semester as well. And we always like to remind folks that we are the #1 in the nation for several years in a row for credentials awarded per capita by public two-year institutions. And we've educated well over 250,000 Kentuckians since starting. We also, just as recently as yesterday, have increased our goals with transfer in Kentucky, with signing a transfer agreement at the University of Louisville system-wide. We've done the same with UK, and others are on the docket as well. And just a reminder, we do 71% of all dual credit in Kentucky with our high schoolers. And just a couple more things, we just celebrated over 4,000 GEDs to incarcerated Kentuckians. We're in our addiction clinics, our jails, and our prisons as well. And we just completed, for the first time in 21 years, a reclassification of our personnel system. And I just finished filling out our cabinet. It usually takes a president a year, sometimes 2 years to fill out a cabinet. We did it in 10 months. But the next, let me just set the stage, which led up to SJR 179 with the opportunity here. I was hired to fix and improve KCTCS, and that's exactly what I'm doing. And as a new president, we needed time to assess the situation so we can better understand where we should go. I inherited a state audit from 2023, which had several observations, which we have cured now, primarily around $99 million in question. We also had a Huron study. Well over $1 million was spent on this, and their recommendations have been infused in the SJR final recommendations as well. We also just concluded a forensic audit, which you all helped fund, so thank you for that. Auditors are our friends. They let us know areas of improvement. And for me, as a new incoming administration, I wanted to know what areas we needed to improve upon, put a timestamp on it, things that happened before I got started, so we can continue forward. And we also have a state audit going on right now at my request for the Kentucky Fire Commission as well, which will be done next year. This year, after inheriting a challenging situation, I've been focused on 3 things: compliance, stability of the system, and filling out a team, which I'm proud of, which rolls quite nicely into the opportunity for today's recommendations. We appreciate this self-examination, and again, we have incorporated the Huron study as well as the findings of SJR 98 from last year into our recommendations. We felt that it'd be important that we chart our own path instead of having it prescribed to us. You asked us to be bold and innovative, and we did this on our own. This is a homegrown project from KCTCS. So before we get started, I want to say thank you to our members of PLT, our faculty, our staff, our students, our external stakeholders, you and others, which have given us input along the way. Our mission continues to be affordability, accessibility, and provide and continue to be the #1 workforce training entity in Kentucky. I know that we are the biggest as a whole and collective entity in our state for post-secondary education, but that it also means it's time for a reset. If you're the same organization you were 25 years ago, you're treading water, and this gives us an opportunity for a once-in-a-generation reset of KCTCS. So let's look at the timeline. You all passed Senate Joint Resolution 179 in April, and if you look, we did not waste any time. We got straight into it. We organized the 11 topics into 5 work teams chaired by a college president. We also included faculty and staff, subject matters expertise, as well as support from our system office as well. Over the past 6 months, we've collected input from the KCTCS community. Any member of our staff and our faculty until October 31st had the opportunity to give us input, and we listened. We also had an external workforce-centric event that let us hear directly from the businesses and employers of Kentucky as well. These 5 work teams divvied up the 11 items which were prescribed to us in Senate Joint Resolution 179. And along the way, we've kept key members of the General Assembly leadership, and the governor's office informed on our progress as well. It's important to know what the decision criteria was. As you can see in front of you, this slide, we wanted to make sure that we anticipated the level of disruption for different recommendations, the anticipated cost, or anticipated savings, if they could even be calculated, as well as the time for completion, implementation, and the opportunity cost. What else could we have accomplished if we're focused on this item in front of us? It's important to remember that no matter what, we had to have consistency in our work. We're going to continue to have unification across Kentucky as well. We predicted, and now have calculated that around 8,000 hours have been put into our Senate Joint Resolution. Again, we did not hire a consultant. We did this ourselves, and we're proud of our work by working off the recommendations of other outside groups over the years. It's important to realize that we represent community colleges, each of which have a local identity, perhaps in your district. We want to make sure that we had emphasis on protecting that identity, to not lose that. We also want to make sure that we differentiate between the term crisis and the term realignment. This is about realignment. We look towards what's going on in other states that had other changes, including Connecticut, North Carolina, and Texas. We included the professional opinions of community college organizations across the country as well. And it's also important to note that for those college systems that moved to single accreditation, we already are achieving 60 to 70% of the benefits already, right now, as of the report today. So as we get into our 11 recommendations, I'm going to ask Dr. Jay McCaslin as well as Dr. Phil Neal to present together. But also keep in mind that this is just the beginning. There are other recommendations we're going to bring to you via legislation, regulation, policy changes as well. So let's get started with our first area and topic with academic program review.
Thank you, Dr. Quarles. The 16 colleges that comprise the Kentucky Community and Technical College system have been and continue to be committed to continuous improvement. Indeed, strong assessment, evaluation, and refinement are not only baked into our organizational culture, it is also a requirement for any institution accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools. While each of the 16 colleges historically had their respective assessment and review cycles, engagement with the Huron Group between December of 2022 and April of 2024 provided an opportunity for greater consistency in timelines and common metrics, particularly in evaluating appropriate and viable academic programs. The engagement with Huron led to the development of new tools to conduct real-time evaluation and has laid important groundwork for streamlining approvals for new programs and the suspension of other programs. This ensures that colleges can respond effectively and efficiently to local employment needs. As a result, during the 2023-24 academic year, the 16 colleges collectively suspended 248 credentials. And this academic year, as of September, an additional 169 credentials have been suspended. That's a total of 417 credentials from throughout the 16 colleges that have been suspended, allowing the colleges to reinvest those resources in greater high-demand employment sectors. Building on the Huron study, the following recommendations enhance the ability of the colleges within KCTCS to ensure continued delivery of relevant academic programs of the highest quality. First, in terms of supporting third-party validation of academic programming quality. While we have confidence in the quality of our programs, that message becomes stronger when external parties can provide their own independent validation. For many programs, this is accomplished through additional program-specific accreditation bodies, including the Accreditation Commission for Education and Nursing, which we call ACEN, the National Accrediting Agency for Clinical Laboratory Science, which is NACLS for our medical laboratory technology programs, HVAC Excellence for air conditioning, or the Automotive Service Excellence, which is ASC for automotive technology programs. For other programs, it may be more appropriate to rely on third-party nationally normed examinations. For example, students graduating from any FAME program in the United States, which, by the way, is an advanced manufacturing program that was begun right here in Kentucky with Toyota Motor Manufacturing, they use the NOCTI, the National Occupational Competency Testing Institute. It's one thing for an institution to claim that they have quality programming. Third-party external evaluation provides the evidence. Moving on, we'd like to improve the structure and uses of our program advisory committees. All technical programs at the 16 colleges have a program advisory committee. The program advisory committee is comprised of local employers who hire the graduates of those programs. Most committees meet once per semester to receive updates on enrollment and program outcomes while providing employers with the opportunity to discuss the state of their industry. The new goal and the basis for this recommendation is to more fully engage our employer partners in deep, meaningful validation of each program, which we'll discuss in a few moments. We also want to leverage meta majors to strengthen our Associate of Arts and Associate of Science programs. The 16 colleges of KCTCS offer a general Associate in Arts degree and an Associate in Science degree. These are both degrees designed for transfer to a university partner. Unlike many states, though, Kentucky does not have specific majors like an Associate of Arts in Education or an Associate of Science in Engineering. The same outcome can be accomplished, though, by maintaining clearly defined pathways for students. For example, someone wanting to become a teacher can easily complete the first 2 years of their coursework at many of the KCTCS colleges, including all the appropriate education courses. Those clearly defined pathways are sometimes referred to as meta majors. We recognize that there are employment sectors where we need more Kentuckians entering the workforce, like education and engineering. It is important, too, that those students be supported financially through the Work Ready Kentucky Scholarship, which Dr. Neal will address later. Program sharing is not a new concept for the KCTCS colleges. In fact, Southeast Community and Technical College and Hazard Community and Technical College have shared a radiography program since before KCTCS was formed. Program sharing involves 2 or more colleges sharing faculty and other instructional resources when it is financially unfeasible for a college to run a program on its own, or more often, when it becomes difficult or impossible to identify qualified candidates to serve as faculty. All of our colleges are committed to increasing the use of program sharing where appropriate, especially in the healthcare sector. Most recently, South Central Kentucky Community and Technical College and West Kentucky Community and Technical College entered into a program sharing agreement for medical laboratory technology. Identifying qualified faculty is exceedingly difficult. By pooling resources, West Kentucky and Sky have just successfully graduated their first cohort under the new shared program, and 100% of the students who will graduate next week already have jobs. After COVID, CPE reinstituted our normal program reviews. These comprehensive program reviews operate on a 4-year cycle and are clustered by industry sector. Using CPE's framework, the KCTCS colleges have realigned their internal program review cycles to go inside with CPE's reviews, eliminating duplicative time and effort. In the past, if an employer approached a college with an interest in starting a new program, it was not uncommon for our answer to say, that'll take about 2 years. In such a rapidly changing environment, that's simply too long. A major contributing factor was the number of approvals that had to be sought, including the local college, the system, the KCTCS Board of Regents, the Council on Postsecondary Education, and SAC-COC. Each approval operated on a different timeline and asked different questions, and it was imperative that the approvals were received in the correct order. KCTCS streamlined its internal processes several years ago when the Board of Regents granted the president the authority to approve new programs for a college if the program already existed in our catalog and was already offered by one of the other KCTCS colleges. Likewise, certificate programs could be implemented or suspended with approval of the system provost, with an accounting of all of the approvals provided to the Board of Regents during their quarterly meetings. CPE has also streamlined their approval process by limiting the comment period for new programs to 30 days. The next phase of streamlining processes while maintaining appropriate oversight is underway with our colleagues at CPE. The goal of the next phase is to align the questions asked by CPE with the information required by SAC-COC. And through that alignment, colleges will be able to provide one response that can satisfy the requirements of both organizations, significantly reducing the time and effort required to initiate a new program. And we look forward to continuing that important work with CPE. The last piece of academic programming is our technical program alignment process. The KCTCS technical program alignment process is a comprehensive and robust assessment process for all technical programs. This process engages employer partners in deep and meaningful evaluations of each technical degree offered at the 16 colleges. It is far more comprehensive than the process used for program advisory committees. As shared earlier, when CPE reinstituted program reviews, they're clustered by industry sector, and they occur every 4 years. In alignment with that process, 1 year prior to a program undergoing their CPE program review, employers from across the Commonwealth will be engaged in reviewing all aspects of the program, including every program competency that is delivered. Employers will tell us what needs to be added, what needs to be tweaked, and what needs to be removed. This is a significant project that will ensure ongoing alignment between the skills being taught and the skills needed by employers. It also aligns employers from across the Commonwealth, as all programs in a sector will be reviewed statewide at the same time.
All right, thank you. So big takeaway there. It's an embedded goal from Huron. I want to thank Dr. Renee Wagner is with us today. A couple hundred programs have been suspended. That allows us to expand in areas of need, especially healthcare across Kentucky. Number 2, workforce. Workforce and KCTCS should be in the same sentence. And we're proud that we are the #1 workforce training provider in Kentucky. This dovetails nicely with the recent announcement of the SWAT initiative, which met last week in Lexington. It's important for us to collaborate with each other, listen to each other, and make sure we're all on the same page. So this includes the ability for us to address the needs of mom and pops to Toyotas as well. It's also making sure that we have robust collaboration, but also the toolkits for us to do it. Next slide, please. It's also important for us to sustain economic development in our state, and one of our primary tools for that is a fund that you all generously fund each year. It's a trains program that allows any company in Kentucky to contact us and help upskill their employees. It is so well utilized that we run out of funding now. We're running out of funding this time each year. We were able to supplement it twice now with $2 million internally. We know that this is a great program for Kentucky because the utilization rate is so high. It also allows us to pivot and be nimble. This is the feedback we're getting from our businesses, the ability to get up and going quicker, which we can do on the workforce side of the house as well. So one of our recommendations will be to increase the funding for the trains program because it's being utilized in your districts back home. It's also important that we elevate the visibility and support of our career pathways. And just this morning, I addressed our school superintendents in Louisville. It's important for us to start talking about student pathways, perhaps at a middle school area. And that means better coordination between what we're doing, regardless of a Kentuckian's age that comes to KCTCS, but also getting started earlier in the decision-making process. It's also important for us to make sure that we are utilizing the tools we have internally at KCTCS and also promoting the short-term career paths as well. You can have a new job in as quick as 4 weeks at KCTCS. If you want a CDL license and go drive a big truck, new job, sometimes you get $50,000 starting salary. We're gonna make sure we promote those just as much as we are promoting the transfer pathway to 4-year universities. Next, please.
Item number 3 in the Senate Joint Resolution 179 excuse me, addresses the need for facilities, campus, and college expansion or downsizing, as well as mergers and consolidations. From this study that we've conducted, it was determined that there is not the need currently to consolidate or merge colleges since the enrollment is at a 10-year high and growing, and the economic development in many regions is strong. However, KCTCS is making a recommendation that will lead to the development of an objective matrix or future decision-making framework on building utilization and determining when campuses need to be significantly downsized, closed, or consolidated if trends change. Factors may include a variety of things that we have listed in the report, but some could include trends in enrollment, regional economic development projections, population projections, facilities utilizations, program sharing, as you heard before, the program review process. But as was recommended by one of our great legislators in the General Assembly, we do want to commit that once the process is developed, we will put it into place and we will use it in the most expeditious manner when the results dictate doing so.
Just to add on to that, we are currently in the process of selling property. About a half dozen properties have either been sold or in process right now. It goes back to the Huron recommendation about space optimization, which we'll continue to talk about. But right now, there's not a process in place. We would like to create one with your all's supervision as well. Moving on to number 4, this is perhaps the most studied area of SJR 179, and one, to be honest with you, that's been around KCTCS in the hallways and around the water coolers since its creation. Should we maintain college level accreditation or merge into one college statewide through single accreditation? This research was not done lightly. Again, lots of conversations with other states that have dealt with this, including Texas and Connecticut as well. We know that, as stated earlier, that we currently enjoy 60 to 70% of the benefits that those who are singly accredited attribute to that single accreditation. With more shared services and more consistency and unification with our programs, especially allied health, will continue to get better. The recommendation here is to preserve the college level accreditation for a number of reasons. Those systems that changed their accreditation status saw decreases in enrollment. Those that changed their accreditation status saw disruption, loss of local identity as well, and it took time and money. Connecticut took 8 years to complete the process, and according to my counterpart there, between $50 and $80 million of new money to accomplish. We are frequently reminded to not expect new money. We think that if we were to do it, it'd be at least a 3-year process of between $10 and $20 million. This goes back to the opportunity costs with the decision criteria that I mentioned earlier as well. So to break this down, think about buying a car. General Motors has many different brands. You can buy a Chevy, you can buy a GMC, perhaps you like Cadillacs, and perhaps you like Buicks. They have different brands, but it's the same company behind the counter. And that's what we seek to achieve at KCTCS, is that we preserve our local brand identity, but it's the same company behind the desk through more shared services. And so that's the recommendation that we made, and we believe, again, that this was the most studied area and was front-loaded, and this recommendation was made early in the process because it affected the work streams later on. Next, governance reform. There are 3 of our recommendations that do have some disagreement. This is one of them. We are the only governing board in the United States that we know of where we have regents who have half votes. Currently, there are 2 faculty, 2 staff, and 2 students, each having half votes. We're the only one in the country, and we understand the historical reason for this during the shotgun wedding in 1997 between our technical colleges and the community colleges. We respect our history, but we also think it's an opportunity for us to reform and look like some of the other colleges and universities in Kentucky. So our recommendation is to keep the percentage of voting power for 1 faculty, 1 staff, and 1 student, same percentage of voting, but move from 14 to 11 regents. There was disagreement among some of our regents on this move, but they voted to make sure that they supported the entire package, but this is a notable disagreement among some of them. We also believe that there should be language included in this that ensures industry involvement in our composition of our board, especially those employer sectors that we most closely align with. And moving quickly on, geographic representation too. Do something that the CPE board already has, is having a member from each of the 7 geographic Supreme Court districts across Kentucky. And we also recommend 2 terms of 4 years each for those serving. Now, the next part has to do with our College Board of Advisors. So each of our 16 colleges have an additional College Board of Advisors. We would like to recommend that we change the name to most closely affiliate what their function would be. It would be the College Board of Advisors instead of college boards. We still think there's room for discussion about this. In fact, we presented this plan to CPE just a few weeks ago. Their members had some input. I know Dr. Thompson and his staff have had some input on this. So there may be some fluidity on this recommendation. But we also think that Kentucky's a regional state. So these College Board of Advisors should meet with each other, perhaps another regional group, at least once yearly, to make sure that there's better alignment to support our 16 presidents as well. We also have seen we've had trouble getting nominations and sometimes quorum of these groups. We've identified that perhaps it's time to review whether or not the nominating committee process should be eliminated just for these college boards of advisors, not the KCTCS Board of Regents. The next recommendation, I believe, is perhaps the biggest and boldest one out of all 11 topics, which Dr. Neal will cover.
Thank you, Dr. Quarles. Item number 6 is dealing with funding model and its adequacy. And as you can see, it includes a number of sub-components there. We've got three bullets on the list before you, but it will take a little bit of explaining to get into some of these, and I will refer to some charts in the packet that we have distributed before the meeting began. We chose to break this down into 3 sections around which we conducted research and made subsequent recommendations that you see on the screen. Funding adequacy, the term itself, which includes state appropriation, performance-based funding, and modern outcomes-based funding structures, was one area. And then also how to determine level of funding for the KCTCS System Office was another. And then finally, we move on to the next bullet after this, which would be tuition affordability and a commitment to return on investment for our students. So we first had to create some operational definition around what do we mean by adequacy, what do we mean by affordability. So we'll get into that in just a moment. The key piece, I think, behind this was to select a data set that we would use for analysis, not only for Kentucky's funding, but across the entire country. And last year's Senate Joint Resolution 98 used a group that you actually heard this morning from Deloitte, a group called SHEO, which is the State Higher Education Executive Officers Association. And they have a database that is populated with official statewide finance data for 2- and 4-year colleges every year. It includes also state financial aid, state by state, but it does allow us to compare state by state. The other thing that we had to do was break the data down into a common metric so that we can compare apples to apples, and so we'll get into that in just a moment. But if you have your booklets in front of you, the report on page 53 has a chart that breaks down our analysis very succinctly when we were looking at Kentucky's level of appropriation to KCTCS on what we call a very common metric that's used in higher education that we call dollars per FTE. It's where you take the total state appropriations and break it down by the total full-time equivalent students that you serve in 1 year. And that way we can compare states that have very large populations and very robust funding to smaller states that have less funding available to their General Assembly and to higher education. And as you can see in the blue bar, Kentucky's dollars appropriated per full-time equivalent using the most recent data set was about $4,887 per FTE. And you can see where that ranks when we compare ourselves to all 50 states. We also looked at SREB states, but we also did something that I'll have to explain why we did this in just a moment. But we looked at the 6 or so states that are inside the SREB that do not have local property tax to support their community colleges. That's a very key piece. And then we took that back out to all 50 states and looked at the 20, which we are part of the 20 states that do not have local property tax. So why do we do that? In the United States, you essentially have 2 different funding sources or 2 different ways that community colleges have bring in revenue for operational expense. In 30 of the states, which we're not part of, they have state appropriation, tuition, and local property tax that does support the operations of their community colleges. The other 20 states that we are a part of just have those first 2 streams. The result of having a third funding stream in those 30 states that we're not a part of is that third funding stream helps to reduce pressures on tuition. So tuition rates are typically lower in those states, and appropriations ease in those states because they can spread the support for their community colleges across 3 funding. In the 20 states that I'm referencing that Kentucky is a part of, we are funded very similarly, not necessarily in dollar amounts, but in the 2 funding streams, which is state appropriation and financial, and tuition. So if you'll turn the page to chart, on the chart at the top of the page on page number 54, you will see those 20 states that we are referencing, and we are considering these to be our benchmark group to which we are comparing ourselves. And you'll see Kentucky in the 4th bar from the right in the dark blue. You can see there is our $4,887 per FTE. And then in the red box, you will see the weighted average of these 20 states. Our operational definition of adequate funding is that if we were funded at or above the average of the 20 comparator states, then we would consider ourselves to be adequately funded. But because we're significantly below that, you can see on the screen that our first bullet point is that we did not in this study feel like we have adequate funding at this point. It was recommended to us that we take a look at those 20 states, because you do see some in there with that are states that you would predict have very high cost of livings. So we did at the chart on the bottom left with the 4 different colored quartiles, we did rank those states according to a cost of living index, and you can then see on page 55 on the other side how we took the average of each quartile, and then that is the second column from the right that says average dollars per. Then the last column on the right in the golden color, you can see the percentage of our funding and where it ranks in relation to the average of those quartiles. So our first recommendation is that KCTCS state appropriation should be at or above the average dollars per FTE state appropriation rate of its benchmark comparator state. So that would be a commitment on behalf of the legislature to move us towards the 8,484. And then if that is the case, if the legislature supports that recommendation, we believe that we were being asked to look at modern outcomes-based funding models to see what is the latest and greatest funding models out in the country. And we looked at a number of them. We believe that if you can move us towards that funding level, we would be willing to reconceptualize, re-envision a new funding model for KCTCS that moves 100% of our funding to an outcomes-based funding model. We've never had that in the state of Kentucky. It's a big, bold move, and it's a big risk on our part. It would be a big risk on your part. The risk on your part would be to move us towards better funding. The risk on our part is in what we're seeing in the most modern outcomes-based models. If your performance goes up from where you performed last year, your appropriations goes up. But if your performance goes down, so does your funding. We're willing to take that risk if you're willing to go along with us and move us towards that middle. But it would require a redesign of our current funding model. And we would like to take time to be arm in arm with you all, with CPE, to develop a new funding model based upon this concept. It would require a couple of things. It would require, first and foremost, that we have a separate funding model from the current model that we have, where we're mixed in with the universities. It would also require a redesign of the model where we run the model kind of 180 degrees from the way we run it now, where the model dictates the funding, not where we have the funding created on the front end, a defined amount of money, and then we push it through the model to disseminate it out to the colleges and universities. But it would be a true performance-based funding, because we would allocate, or we would decide on metrics and compare our performance this year to our performance last year. That's true performance-based funding. But we are willing to take that step like the state of Texas did last year, which was the first year of their new funding model that's being lauded as the next evolution in higher education funding models. This type of visionary transformation would require bold change and bold commitment to accountability, because 100% outcomes-based funding is, in our opinion, the highest degree of accountability that you can have for a higher ed institution, and we are willing to take that risk if you are willing to go with us on that journey. All right. The next part of this is dealing with tuition rates and a tuition affordability and our commitment to a return on investment. And so, as you can see in the bullets here, we have done a tremendous amount of data analysis in relation to tuition affordability. We used actually the same database that I was mentioning that has all 50 states, and we looked at also the benchmark groups of where our tuition rates rank in relation to those 20 benchmark states. And our tuition rate is right at the midpoint or slightly below the midpoint, so we believe in relation to our comparison benchmark states, our tuition rates remain affordable, but we didn't want to just stop with that one analysis point. We looked at our tuition rates in relation to our 8 public universities in the state of Kentucky, and our tuition generally is less than half of our public universities' tuition rate. We also used another common analysis point that is used in many parts of higher education across the country when people are analyzing tuition. That is, how does a full-time tuition for 1 year for a full-time student compare in relation to the maximum Pell Grant? The maximum Pell Grant for the year is a little over $7,300. If you were to look at our tuition or our current rates of a student going anywhere from 24 credit hours in 1 year, which would make them full-time for a year, all all the way up to 30 credit hours, it would range from approximately $4,500 for the year, all the way up into the low to mid $5,000 range. Well, you can see if the maximum Pell Grant is over $7,300 for the year, our tuition is still remaining affordable. The reason why that metric is important because the students who qualify for the maximum Pell Grant are typically students who have the greatest financial need. And if your tuition for the year is higher than the maximum Pell Grant, those students are going to face even more constraints on their ability to afford higher education. When we flip to the conversation around return on investment, we do believe in looking at a variety of different metrics like as our student debt levels as far as student loans, their repayment of those student loans or loan defaults. We've looked at job placement rates of our graduates in Kentucky companies as well as the wages that they earn when they are placed or when they do find employment, which you heard Dr. McCaslin talk about some of the success of a new program that we have right now. So we believe the return on investment is strong. Less than 1/3, right at about 30% of our students do take out student loans, and nearly all those students are in good repayment over the years. Our loan default rates are at or below the national average in the single-digit rate. Our graduates from Kentucky, from KCTCS colleges who graduate with their associate's degree have the highest job placement rates inside Kentucky companies, not outside Kentucky companies, but inside Kentucky companies out of all undergraduates from Kentucky's higher education sectors, including public and private universities. Their wages are also very strong. Our graduates who are placed into Kentucky companies with our associate degrees typically out-earn bachelor degree graduates from our private universities, or within 5% of earnings of bachelor degree graduates of our comprehensive universities, earn within 15% of earnings of bachelor degree graduates working in Kentucky companies who graduated from our research institutions. So, given that, we are going to make a recommendation that we continue that commitment to affordability by expanding a very successful program that you all created a number of years ago, and that is our Work Ready Kentucky Scholarship. It was created for to encourage students to go into high-wage, high-demand technical fields, which has been very successful. We think that it should be applied to all of our Associate of Applied Science, or what people might call technical programs. We do have a few that don't apply to that, are not eligible for that scholarship. We also, as you heard Dr. McCaslin talk earlier about meta majors or transfer pathways into high need areas such as K-12 education, where they'll start with us for 2 years, transfer into a university to finish their education degree and go to work in Kentucky, or engineering or social work, that students in those transfer pathways, which are not eligible for the Kentucky Work Ready Scholarship currently, that we believe those should be as well. And then we also believe that it should be allowed that the students use this during the summer terms. Now, right now, we're talking about the funding running out mid-year because it is being used so well by our students. We would have to invest in the funding and expansion, not only the eligibility requirements, but the funding level so that we can serve more and more Kentuckians.
Okay, big picture here. We've got 4 more recommendations. We're going to cascade through those for you, Mr. Chairman, so we have questions. But we're prepared to go to 100% outcomes-based funding. Perhaps as a question and discussion for the 2026 session. Secondly, just a reminder, we're half the price of the traditional 4-year schools in Kentucky. We're proud of that. Our Work Ready Scholarship is working. It's getting people employed in relevant, high-demand job areas. We appreciate the increase in funding for that this past year, and that's an area of more investment that we would like to ask for. Very quickly, number 8, personnel system. Due to our creation after 1997, we have employees in 4 separate personnel systems at KCTCS. As you can imagine, a lot of extra work has to be put in on our HR team. After listening to the comments from our KCTCS team, this was perhaps the number 1 common issue, and we did discuss perhaps merging into one system for efficiency purposes. We have 4,000 full-time employees, give or take. Only 80 of these are in the other 3 personnel systems. And so we believe, after listening to our employees, a promise made is a promise kept, and we will endorse and recommend an attrition-based endorsement and maintain the 4 personnel systems. The next 2 have to do with dual credit and transfer issues. And before Dr. McCaslin talked about it, I must say that CPE and I have been talking about this all year. They respectfully disagree with these 2 recommendations, but we want to get this out in front of you, perhaps to have a bigger discussion across Kentucky.
So with respect to our dual credit recommendation, we are recommending that KCTCS become the sole provider of dual credit in the Commonwealth. That is not about market share. Currently, KCTCS already provides 71% of the dual credit to more than 35,000 high school students last year. This is really about, at the end of the day, aligning the talent pipeline. A few years ago, one of the colleges brought their advisory committees together, particularly in allied health and nursing. And each of those advisory committee members said, your 2-year nursing degree takes 3 years. And that's accurate, Senator Givens. It was at the time. Because when a student came in, they had to take a year's worth of prerequisite courses before they could get into the selective admissions program. Those advisory committees challenged that college to ensure that all of the prerequisite courses were available at the dual credit level. And now we have students that take all of their prerequisite dual credit, graduate from high school, and walk right into those selective admissions programs in nursing, radiography, respiratory, and medical laboratory technology. That happens because all of the courses are ours, and there's direct alignment. So when we talk about becoming the sole provider of dual credit, please think of that more along the lines of increasing the speed at which we can provide students into the workforce. And then on transfer, we are recommending, and this is something that Dr. Thompson and I have talked about before too, we are recommending that we build upon the success of what happened in 2011. House Bill 160 addressed transfer in particular, but also what it did was require the 16 colleges of KCTCS to establish common course numbering so that English 101 at West Kentucky Community Technical College is the exact same as it is at Hazard Community and Technical College. There are 15 states in the United States right now that already have common course numbering between the community colleges and the universities. What we really believe is that this will streamline the transfer opportunities and fulfill the mission of the remainder of House Bill 160, which was to allow students to complete an associate degree at one of the 16 KCTCS colleges and seamlessly transfer to one of our 8 public universities.
Okay, thank you. One more recommendation to go. I'll take us home. Happy to take some questions. But again, CP does respectfully disagree, and I would imagine some of the other universities in this room might disagree with those too. But we wanted to back our team, back our work groups, what they thought was best for KCTCS as well. Last category, the old legislator in me comes out. This is my favorite one, identifying outdated and conflicting statutory language. When I was serving here, there was still a Civil Wars Pensioners Board still on the books. We got rid of that. So a lot of this language, we've identified 17 statute areas, has to do with formational language that was passed during the 1997 House Bill 1 bill passage. We also don't want to stop at statute revisions and reducing the number of laws on the books. We also want to look at regulatory reform as well. Policy. This year we found out, I discovered, our cabinet had a great conversation, that 80% of our policies at KCTCS are outdated. 80%. So one thing we've done is we hired a full-time person who does nothing but policy review. And so we'd like to add to this list. If you all have anything that you want to add to that, please let us know. So in conclusion, I'm proud of our work. I'm proud of our teams. There's too many names to mention here today about who was involved in this. I want to thank Dr. Aaron Thompson in particular with CPE, with coordination and collaboration with this result. We incorporated here on Senate Joint Resolution 98 from last year, and we're proud of our homegrown Kentucky-based approach. There are other items that I'd like to add on to this very quickly that go beyond the scope of SJR. Perhaps it's time to have mandatory FAFSA in Kentucky. We leave $58 million on the table, the federal funds that students may not know they're eligible for. KEYS reform as well. If you graduate high school, don't go to college, don't attempt post-secondary education, after 5 years you lose your KEYS eligibility. 1/3 of our students are adult learners, some of which may have never tried college before. Perhaps they should be eligible for the KEYS scholarship money that they earned while in college. Let us use the Department of Revenue to collect bad debts. Let us be eligible for P3. Let us have bonding authority. Give us the tools that the other universities behind me already have. We may never use them, but let us be on the same bench in terms of what tools we have in our toolbox as well. There's confusing titles in KCTCS. I want to welcome your input on how we can improve that. So I'm going to conclude with this. These are the why questions, the recommendations. It's a historic day for us. We're proud of our work. We welcome your feedback. We know there's going to be some fluidity during the legislative process. We welcome that as well. But we're going to take these recommendations and put them in 4 buckets. Bucket number 1, what KRS changes do we want to recommend to you? Bucket number 2, what regulations need to be reformed, eliminated, or codified? Bucket number 3, internal policies, things that we can do on our own. Again, 80% of them outdated. And bucket number 4, to be quite frank with you, are things we don't know what to do with yet. But we want to work with you. We look forward to your questions. And we want to build a coalition of our business partners, our higher education cohort, to make sure that we come in with a bill that's nonpartisan, one that achieves the support of everybody in this room, and so that we can say, in the first time in 25 years, we've reset KCTCS. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, President Quarles. I want to thank you and your team for the work you put in on putting this report together. There's a lot of information here, a lot for us to digest. We do have some members that had asked to ask questions due to time. I'm going to ask any member that has a question if they would email that question to our staff administrator. They will get that to the appropriate party, and we'll make sure that all members have a copy of response of the question and the answer, so everybody will have that. We did have two individual citizens who had driven quite a way to speak today, so I'm going to give them the opportunity now to come up and speak. Mr. Lewis L. Pittman Jr. and Mr. John Laster.
Thank you.
Here. I know you all drove quite a ways today, and time is kind of short, but we will give you an opportunity to speak briefly. So please, just make sure that green light is on the microphone, and the microphone is pulled close to you. And if you would identify yourself for the record, and I'll administer the oath to you, and then you can proceed with your statements. And let's try and keep it 2 to 3 minutes each, please.
I'll go first. I'm Dr. Lewis Pittman.
Make sure you've got your microphone turned on. There should be a green light
There we
that
go.
pops up.
That better?
Yes.
I'm Dr. Lewis Pittman from Hopkinsville. I'm a former food animal practitioner who left practice to pursue a residency and doctoral program in diagnostic pathology. I spent 24 years at the Murray State University Breathitt Veterinary Center as a veterinary pathologist, and 14 years of that time as the department head. I was a faculty member there teaching in the animal health technology and pre-vet program for the 24 years that I was there. I have some serious concerns regarding Murray State's capability of attracting and retaining qualified faculty members for this proposed School of Veterinary Medicine. I need to preface this by saying that Murray's made a lot of their School of Agriculture, their Animal Health Technology and Pre-Vet program, and the Breathitt Veterinary Center as key features in their proposal. However, the AVMA Council on Education requires that a veterinary school be an autonomous body on equal footing within the university to all other schools or colleges within that university. So it will not be part of the School of Agriculture. We'll have its very own dean, we'll have its own faculty, its own curriculum, admissions committee, that sort of thing. So there's been, I won't say some confusion, but perhaps some misleading facts put forward with regard to how much of a role the School of Agriculture is going to play in this School of Veterinary Medicine. I'm not sure how willing they are to give up any of their facilities, their property, including the Breathitt Veterinary Center, which is 60 miles from main campus. Are they willing to transfer that to the School of Veterinary Medicine? But I'll come back to that. The AVMA has very strict guidelines on the needs for the faculty members that will be instructing these veterinary students. Over the last 30 years, I've watched veterinary colleges and veterinary diagnostic labs, which are usually affiliated with the School of Veterinary Medicine, stealing faculty members from one another because the available pool of qualified, trained faculty members is so small and has not increased significantly over the last 30 years. Over the last 20 years, the schools of veterinary medicine that are established and the 3 that have been started in the last 20 years, which are distributive programs, have essentially doubled the number of veterinary students that we are currently educating. Add on to that, we have 9 more, or 4 that have just gotten provisional accreditation, and 9 more that are in the pipeline for development, and Murray would make a 10th. That's going to significantly increase the amount of competition for available, trained, qualified faculty members who are capable of educating this new generation of veterinary students. At present, Murray State has 9 DVMs on staff, 9 veterinarians on staff. 3 of those are on main campus in the Animal Health Technology program. They have full-time teaching appointments there. The other 6 are at the Breathitt Veterinary Center. One is the director who does not teach, and these are my former colleagues. 3 of those 5 remaining faculty members are over 70 years of age. 2 are over 75. Not to be ageist, but they have a short shelf life ahead of them. I retired 6 years ago. In those 6 years, there's been at least 1 position for a pathologist that's been open full-time. They've been unable to attract a qualified applicant for that position. The virologist and immunologist positions have been open for 4 and 6 years without being able to fill those positions. They've recently combined those two positions into one and hired a PhD immunologist to fill that slot. Back this past spring, Murray State conducted a compensation survey, and one of the organizations that helped analyze that data was the College and University Professional Association for Human Resources. They determined that 51% of Murray State faculty and 60% of Murray State staff were underpaid or paid below current market rates for that size university in the region of the country where Murray is located. Murray is going to have a hard time running with the big dogs, if you will, so far as trying to recruit quality, educated faculty members to teach in a veterinary college of veterinary medicine.
Dr. Pittman, if you
Yes,
could
sir.
kind of summarize
Summarize
so your other gentlemen you have a chance to speak.
I have some significant concerns that Murray is not going to be able to compete for faculty members and for clinical sites when we have 9 new distributive model veterinary schools that are already in the pipeline ahead of them, and 4 of those are within a 500-mile drive. So clinical sites are rapidly going to be snapped up that would perhaps not be available to Murray. So,
Thank you. Mr. Laster, could you identify yourself for the record and then proceed?
I'm John Laster. I'm a mixed animal rural veterinary practitioner in Western Kentucky, based out of Elkton, Kentucky. I've served on the Murray State Joint Task, or the Murray State Task Force for the veterinary school. A board member of KVMA. Many of the Murray State faculty and staff. I work with the rodeo team there, and many of them are my clients, including Dr. Parr, who I have a lot of respect for. A lot of respect for Murray, and frankly make a majority, or at least a portion of my living inside of Callaway County. So what I would like to speak to is in regards to the model of the school. I have 21 staff members. We're opening a second location in Hopkinsville, 2 large animal hospitals, 2 small animal hospitals. I'm adding a 5th veterinarian right now. Caseload is 21,000 divided by 4 vets. As of today, of course, we will not be adding to the caseload today because I'm here, but the other 3 are working. So point being, when we look at the DO schools and the distributed model schools that are proposed at other ones, they're being trained by board certified doctors, okay? In our world, I am a general practitioner. I'm a general practitioner with a significant caseload, and I have concern that I do not have time nor training nor skill to instill in my students that would be working with me in a distributed model near the knowledge base and critical thinking skills and clinical skills that can be achieved with a 1-year clinical teaching program inside a hospital. So my actual concern is, and also mainly, frankly, the national board pass rate. Traditional model schools, we have a great relationship with Auburn University that is now almost at 80 years. We're still, even post-COVID, at a 90+% board pass rate first time. The original Murray State model is modeled after Arizona. We just got our first test scores back from Arizona with a 72% pass rate. Frankly, there is a problem with distributed model schools and passing the national board exams. And I think as responsible citizen, I can't sit here and say that I can agree that a distributed model school is superior to the program that we have at Auburn. When you are at Auburn, you have 129 boarded faculty on staff training our students right now. And we've got 152 students down there, costing the Commonwealth $5.5 million on current contract, with options to expand, and also probably seats at other schools that the distributed model schools are opening up spots for. So why distributed model? Frankly, it's a cost analysis deal. It's a lot cheaper to run a distributed model school than it is a real, a full clinical hospital. But I must stress, Western Kentucky needs rural veterinarians. That's part of Murray's mission. 3% of veterinarians returning to Kentucky are doing that in a food animal standpoint right now. I can think of less than 10. I made a list last night. There's less than 10 in the Western Kentucky area that are true food animal veterinarians. The problem is we're competing with corporate entities that are buying out clinics. They immediately stop emergency services when they buy the clinic, and they stop large animal because it is inefficient and it's not cost effective to run large animal clinics compared to the money you can make in small animal. That's leading to a significant amount, with the increase in student loan debt, to some of the issues we're seeing in shortages. And Dr. Quarles, in his time as commissioner, had a veterinary shortage working group that is now, thanks to the Senate and House, passed a resolution that if students stay 5 years, they will have $85,000 debt reduction over that 5-year period. Set down roots in rural Kentucky. And if you'll look, most of our Western Kentucky counties are in that. So largely, I just be brief with my comments here, but I'm afraid that, number one, in a distributed model, that my caseload is going to be too high to teach effectively compared to Auburn University. Number two, I'm a general practitioner. I passed boards in 2012, and I've been in practice since. So I'm not in an ivory tower. I'm not in a school setting. I don't have advanced diagnostics, and the students I would teach, I've got to teach rural veterinary medicine, which is fine. But they also need exposure to the advanced diagnostics and the things that Dr. Pittman and his advanced degree offered for years at Murray. Number three here, and maybe the biggest risk, this is the horse capital of the United States. What we're doing with the distributed model is putting untrained veterinary students and they're asking us as veterinarians in a distributed model to take a $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $2 million thoroughbred and let a vet student who is completely untrained work on that horse. Where in a controlled teaching environment of a university with a teaching hospital, you have mentors, you have specialists, you have technicians, you've got a lot better control and risk aversion to both the farmer or the dog owner, the pet owner, or the horse owner in my case, versus, I've got sometimes doing pre-purchases on $300,000 horses. I can't let a student do that. I would not have a business. And so the students suffer because of that. Because of that, the students suffer that would be working under me in a distributed model. Narrowing it down to my point, if Kentucky and the Commonwealth and this body decides to build a veterinary school, unleash the potential of the Commonwealth and build a veterinary school, we'd love to have it in Western Kentucky. But the deal is, if we're going to do it right, because Auburn University is one of the most effective economics, good, solid, standard, practice-ready, day one veterinary school in the United States. And that's all I have to say, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Well, I certainly appreciate both of you. I know you had quite a drive to get here this morning. Appreciate you taking the time to come up and share your viewpoints. We do have one more item on the agenda. Members, we have 8 administrative regulations on the agenda. They should be on the form. And now no action is required. By placing the regulations on the agenda, they will go into effect upon the adjournment of the meeting unless the committee finds issue with a proposed regulation. Are there any comments or discussions, concerns from any of the members on any of the administrative regulations? For no further questions, the regs will go into effect. Thank you. At this time, our meeting is adjourned. And thank you for your service during the interim.